As a bit of a follow-up to my Us review, I wanted to do another sort of video talking about spoilers and discussing some of the, metaphors, meanings, theories, that kind of shit. And I thought that maybe that would work better off camera, doing this kind of thing. Yeah, so I don't know. This comes as a bit of a secondary video on Us by me. So, Us follows suit with Get Out as another slow-paced horror film that soon enough reveals itself to be a secretly science fiction-based film with a bit of a nonsense fantasy thrown in to explain away shit that doesn't make that much sense. Such as in Us, why the clones had kids, the same versions of their clone kids. What the fuck kind of a way to say that sentence? What I'm saying is, the clones of the people had kids, the same kids as the original's kids. You know what I'm saying? Same kids. Thing is, DNA isn't going to work like that. And since the clones are quite physical beings and not haunted mirror projections or some shit, why would the kids have clones of themselves as well if these science experiments that resulted in the clones' existence happened sometime around 1986 or so? Well, the movie explains that away with bullshit like because souls, the tethered share the same soul, and so they are connected in a stronger way than logic can explain. The original people above ground's actions therefore do affect the tether because their soul is connected. And unironically, the soul explanation is enough for me. I can actually buy into that. It's a bit of a fantastical idea, and this is fiction, so I'm not going to think too much about it. The kids have clones despite the scientific inability because their souls are connected in some magical way. And so everything about these clones mirrors the originals, including the kids, even though they wouldn't have been born when the clones were made. You know what I'm getting at? I don't know. Maybe that's a bad explanation. Anyway, moving on. Another thing I have to say about Us is it just me? And I'm not trying to be a smartass here, but that twist was super predictable, right? From the start, you know something's off about Adelaide from the very start. Plus, then we see a scene of her as a child at the therapist, and her mum is saying she just wants her daughter back. And I'm like, that's because she's not your daughter. Obvious. That being said, I love the execution of it, and I don't think the predictability of the twist ruined the experience at all. And I far from guessed all the other details involved and all the other key elements, so it's fine. That was a bit predictable, I thought, but that was fine. One of my favorite elements to Us is how it explores identity and the idea of us versus them. In this scenario where you're confronted with your perfect yet creepy horror clone of yourself, you're bound to ask, who am I? Who are you? And who is this idea of us? In the movie, the cloned versions of those involved become the antagonist, and we, due to being from the point of view of the original people, also see them as that. From their point of view though, the clones, particularly Reds, who understands the happenings of the situation that much more, they are kind of wronged people who are fighting for their rights. It's kind of a weird thing to think about. These are representations of the underrepresented, the ones at a disadvantage, as they're painted as the villain, which, to be fair, if we're looking at this literally and not as a metaphor, isn't hard to do, what with all the stabbing, but there's more to it than that on the metaphorical level. Us is very much a film about unity and division and the societal structure that we all find ourselves in. Particularly though, of course, this is supposed to represent America in that way too, which is interesting as the time I spent in the country 2 years ago, specifically in LA, I saw some of the richest people in the world and some of the poorest all living within neighborhoods of one another. In this way of thinking, those all around us are all on a technical level us. We are a people, even those who we don't know. We're connected in some way by just being people on this earth. We all have some form of similarities, and there is someone somewhere out there who is very similar to ourselves in many ways. The film begging the question, what's the difference between that person and us? Different opportunities, better lives, more money, vice versa. Lots of different things like that. We're all placed where we naturally belong, and most people in real life, and as the tethered and original people did for such a long time, remain. They stay in that situation. But I think the film shows us through the character of Red and the tethered that it's possible to fight for change and to fight for the betterment of yourself in a really fucked up and violent way, but still. I think the movie takes an optimistic viewpoint in that in some form there's a way. But it also shows that there's two sides to that story, and the duality and balance of our society doesn't work so that everyone can be at the top. You've got to drag someone down to take their place. This idea of crab mentality and the decision of whether we help each other or push those beside us down is a tough one to consider. The film's protagonist, Adelaide, chose the latter. In fact, she's really sort of the villain of the story, depending on the angle that you look at it from. But because of her villainous actions, she gets to be be happy. She gets what she wants. Through the film's twist in that she swapped places with the original Adelaide, the new and swapped over woman who was to become her is now on top, and the end of the movie shows both a happy and sad side of this through Adelaide's smile as she drives off into the sunset to an ever uncertain apocalyptic future, but we also see her son Jason's reaction to perhaps recognizing what she'd done and the dark truth behind how it happened and who his mother really is. That being said though, after all that time, she is his mother. She is Adelaide. It's too late to go back by this point. That's her life. By living it, she kind of earned it. Is that a fucked up thing to say? Man, it screws with your head and it kind of begs you to ask yourself whether you'd have done the same under the rare circumstance and with the rare opportunity bestowed upon you. So when you really think about it, who in the film is evil? Because yes, Red and the Tethered are killing people, but I mean, think about their situation, right? From their point of view, with such limited perspective, this feels like their only choice. It's a more morally interesting question than it might first seem. Another thing I need to discuss is the question behind whether or not Adelaide remembers what happened. In the film, we see flashbacks to her as a child. Her parents concerned as she is not speaking and she's acting strangely ever since they were at that Santa Cruz beach and she went missing for, quote, 15 minutes. They wonder what happened to her during that time, and the theory is she has post-traumatic stress disorder. We later find out she wasn't speaking because she literally couldn't, as by that point, the swap had already been made. This was originally the underground clone Red taking Adelaide's place and learning to become her. And while I very much think the decision at the time was on purpose, I think that our now modern day protagonist Adelaide, who we've been spending the movie with, didn't remember this, at least in the ongoings before the film's beginning. I argue that she totally repressed the memories of this, and it has now become a faint memory, a childhood nightmare, turning the location and the particular house of mirrors into a horrific but hazy recollection. I don't know what she remembers exactly, and I don't know when she remembers it, because she definitely does by the end. But it looks like in the end, as they're driving away, that's when she's remembering. But I may have just read her facial reaction wrong there. She may remember when the clones are revealed to be there at the start or at any point after that. Not sure, but an interesting point to bring up. If you're watching this, tell me when you think she remembers, or if you think she remembers it at all, if she remembered it the whole time. That's what my beautiful wife thinks. It's an interesting question. Another interesting thing about Us is the fact that the horrific situation and basic premise of the film is much more global than we first realized in the context of the film. The main family aren't the only ones experiencing the horrible haunts of their villainous counterparts. It's a little unclear on how global this is, as a closing shot pans across a mountainscape showing the Tethered united, suggesting that it's happening everywhere. But I don't buy into that, because the film said that the science experiments that the government or whoever it was did were among the underground tunnels of California. So I don't know why the Tethered would have spanned further than that. Surely the tunnels end somewhere, and there couldn't have been a clone for every single person there either, because people move in and out of cities. But the movie doesn't focus on that exact minute detail, so I'm not sure it even matters all that much. The point is, it's bigger than we first thought, and I definitely didn't guess that twist. It hadn't even occurred to me for even a second. The whole movie sort of parallels my favorite horror film of last year, Hereditary, in that way, as it starts off as a fantastic yet basic horror movie with impressive direction that starts off small scale and personal, only to soon reveal that a much grander and more ambiguous plot was going on all along. I actually think that Us pulls this escalation off to a better degree than Hereditary, in that though I absolutely love Hereditary, I think it kind of falls off at the end a little bit. I don't believe Us does. I think it works throughout as the personal fight for survival of the main family, as we experience it with them through a home invasion type of execution, and I think it works as it slowly gets bigger and bigger and explores grander ideas as we go along. Us gets us to look in on who we are as people, both as individuals and as a group. Its main idea, I think, is that we are both our own worst enemies and our greatest aid together. The class is divided both literally and physically, and quite obviously representing reality in the above and below people within the movie and within our own lives as well, makes for an interesting point in which we see that once the Tethered achieve their goals together, they still remain faithful and united in this Hands Across America march that the original Adelaide became obsessed with after having seen it on TV as a young child. Yet the people in power, i.e. the people above ground and the people in real life who are billionaires and whatever, do not care, and in fact instead compete. We see as Gabe Wilson complains about his friend getting a new car just to fuck with him. he says. This, I feel, is also supposed to heavily reflect upon the real world on a large scale, in that the 1% look down upon everyone else and everyone else looks up in jealousy. There's something to be said about all this. I just don't know what it is, to be honest. So, I know that wasn't quite as structured as a normal sort of video like this might always be, but I just wanted to get some points across. I just wanted to talk about some of the sort of details and stuff like that because I loved it. I think it's worth talking about and exploring more, and I officially love Us. I thought it was great. I think it was as good as Get Out, and I made one of these sorts of videos for Get Out when it came out as well. Why not do it for his second movie? Let's do the cliche video essay thing where I'm like, hey guys, now that my video essay is over, I'm on camera. Ooh. I don't know what else to do with that, but like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that shit. Bye.